Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carol Johnson, Senior Director of Communications and Marketing with the COPD Foundation. Thank you all for joining us today for the COPD Foundation Town Hall. Now I'd like to introduce today's panelists. Today we'll hear from Ruth Talsinger, who is President and CEO of the COPD Foundation and your host for the event. Ruth is internationally recognized as a patient-focused innovator, healthcare leader, and clinical scientist with extensive research and development experience, leading to the delivery of approved medicines for patients. Formerly at GSK until 2019, Ruth is a longtime COPD Foundation collaborator and served as Chief Scientific Officer at the Foundation until taking the helm of the organization in 2020. She has successfully led public and private partnerships and nonprofit organizations through critical advancements and clinical trials, and led the formation of COPD 360 Net, the Foundation's digital health and therapeutics development accelerator network, as well as the Community Engagement Committee, known as CENCO, and Oxygen 360 Advocacy Program, among other areas. Welcome, Ruth. I'd like to also introduce Alan Hamilton. Alan is a clinical scientist by training. Prior to joining the foundation this past year, he held several senior scientific positions over his 25-year career with Boehringer Ingelheim. And that work was highlighted by his role as a global clinical program lead for the once-daily LAMA-LABA combination, Stiolto. Throughout his academic and industry career, Alan has shown a passion for developing and evaluating interventions that target the alleviation of breathlessness and associated activity limitation in COPD. Since 2013, Alan represented Boehringer Ingelheim in the COPD Biomarker Qualification Consortium, known as CBQC, as industry co-chair for the Constant Work Rate Exercise Working Group, and more recently served as industry co-chair for the CBQC Steering Committee. Alan recently joined the Planning Committee for the American Thoracic Society Pulmonary Rehabilitation Assembly, and he also leads Pivot at the COPD Foundation, which you'll hear more about today. Welcome, Alan. And let me introduce to you Delia P. Oliver. Delia is Vice President of the Bronchiectasis and NTM 360 at the COPD Foundation. She manages several of the Foundation's research programs, including the Bronchiectasis and NTM Research Registry and Bronch and NTM 360 Social. Delia has extensive experience managing patient registries and research consortia, and serves a critical role in connecting patients, healthcare providers, researchers, and industry partners to work collaboratively and advance research in the fields of COPD, bronchiectasis, and non-tuberculous mycobacterial or NTM lung disease. Welcome, Delia. We also welcome John Torrance, who is a bronchiectasis and NTM ambassador at the Foundation. John brings a patient perspective to the organization and communicates with patients about how to live well with chronic lung diseases through the Bronchiectasis Information Line and by contributing to the Bronchiectasis and NTM Forum online. John has had NTM and bronchiectasis for 13 years and has been through 4 treatment cycles, including lung surgery. He's graciously agreed to share his lung disease journey today with us. Thank you all for joining us. Now let's get started. Good afternoon, Ruth. Could you spend just a few minutes sharing with us what's new and top of mind at the COPD Foundation?
Sure, certainly. Let me start by thanking the attendees for joining us today. We appreciate our community and those who want to learn more about us by coming together for this event. Your participation and support are pivotal to our ability to meet the mission of the Foundation. Let me talk about a program that is critical to lung health research, advocacy, and education, and that is IMPACT. IMPACT is what we call Hill Day in the United States. We just wrapped up our IMPACT 2022 event in May, which was a virtual day of meetings with congressional representatives. Volunteers, including patients, caregivers, providers, and others who are personally impacted by COPD, bronchiectasis, or NTM lung disease, represented many states across the United States, and they spoke with members of Congress and their staff. Many people on this call may not know that chronic lung conditions are a leading cause of death and disability in the United States and globally, and yet research and education are severely underfunded and under-resourced on a global scale. For example, in the United States, COPD, although being a major cause of disability and death in the United States, it's number 176 in chronic disease funding by the National Institute of Health, or NIH. We're looking to change that, which is why Impact 2022 advocated for government funding that prioritizes patient-inspired research projects and education. We're really grateful for the volunteers who spoke with members of Congress during Impact 2022 and shared their stories and our critical policy priorities, asking their elected official to increase NIH funding for lung health research and to provide the Centers for Disease Control, or CDC, with the funds to support chronic disease education and awareness. The second part was to provide lasting Medicare coverage of virtual pulmonary rehabilitation. Pulmonary rehabilitation is a life-saving treatment, and the virtual aspect coverage was funded during the pandemic. Notably, access to pulmonary rehabilitation was one of the questions asked by today's participants. I truly believe that ensuring access to pulmonary rehabilitation is of utmost importance. We asked Congress to simplify Medicare coverage of liquid oxygen treatment, which is currently a crisis for people with severe lung conditions who require oxygen therapy. We also invited members of Congress to join the COPD caucus to advance policies benefiting people living with COPD. One aspect of Impact 2022 is personal stories. And the personal stories of volunteers shared and information about their lived experience with lung diseases are powerful and needed for Congress to recognize that this is an active, vocal community that needs affordable healthcare solutions, prevention, and ultimately a cure for these conditions. In fact, one of our volunteers was at Ground Zero on 9/11 and shared her personal story with members of Congress about living with COPD. We heard from one of the participants how important it felt for him to be a part of that joint voice at Impact 2022, advocating for research funding. In other disease areas, we saw the power of raising patient voices. If you look at heart disease, AIDS, breast cancer, with the voice of patients acting together in unison and speaking together brought public awareness and resulted in funding for research. COVID-19 is the great example of what public support for research can do for rapid development and approval of innovative treatments and vaccines.
Thank you, Ruth. That was great information. And I think it's so powerful and impactful what you talked about. And so your name is really relevant to call this Impact. Can you tell the audience how they might get involved with some of our advocacy priorities?
Sure, they can visit our Take Action section of the COPD Foundation website, which provides means to look up their local representatives, engage in various advocacy campaigns, and learn about other ways to get involved. We'll provide a link in this chat, and a resource will be provided again at the end of this town hall.
Okay, that's great. We also received some questions from town hall participants, and they asked some really interesting, nice questions. One was around what is new in COPD research and treatments. And I know that innovation and research are core to the foundation. Is there anything related to the work that the foundation has been doing around early diagnosis, patient-centric approaches, or other areas that you'd like to share with us today?
Sure, and thank you for the question. Let me start with our patient-centric approach to research. In 2021, and you can see that in our annual report, we reported the results of the BRIDGE project named Bridging the Gap Between Patients, Caregivers, and COPD Researchers. That was the name of the grant called BRIDGE. The foundation asked our patient and caregiver community, what research matters to you the most? We asked the question because the reality is, as a researcher, is that COPD research decisions and study ideas to date have included limited input from people with COPD and their caregivers. We wanted to maintain laser focus on our mission of meeting the needs of our community and giving voice to patients that they didn't have before. What we heard is that focusing on a cure for COPD is of paramount importance to our community. Patients want better medications for shortness of breath or breathlessness, preventing flare-ups, improving symptoms, improving their mobility and independence, and getting better access to innovative and efficient medical devices like oxygen concentrators. But for the foundation, it's not enough to just listen to patients and report the results of surveys. We need to take action. And if we fast forward to this year, 2022, the foundation continues to put our commitment to the patient into action. This year, the Bridge team implemented a new program that we call Bridge Patient to Investigator Training to educate and inspire people with lung diseases or their caregivers to participate as investigators or participate in research teams and work directly with researchers so they can be at the heart of research that aims to solve problems that matter to our community. We continue to increase participation of people with chronic lung diseases in our board, in our committees, because they bring perspective to what we do every day. They bring a diverse point of view, sometimes really diverse, and they help people at the foundation stay grounded and focus on our mission-driven purpose, which is to serve our patient and caregiver community.
Oh, that's phenomenal, Ruth. I love to see living to the promise. So also several participants today asked questions about how they can get involved in some of the clinical trials and registries. What would be the ways that they could do that?
Our COPD and bronchiectasis and NTM registries continue to be instrumental in linking patients in our community with clinical trials and surveys on a variety of topics that we run pretty regularly. We currently have a major recruitment drive actually underway to increase participation in our patient-powered research network, or as we call it, PPRN. And there's a link provided in the chat, I hope. We're trying to recruit a more diverse population, more people of color, or people over the age of 18 who are at risk for lung disease based on their smoking history, their environmental pollution or occupational exposure, if you think of firefighters or veterans, or people exposed to indoor or outdoor air pollution, or people who have relatives who are diagnosed with COPD. So in general, we really encourage people to participate in research, either as investigators or as participants providing their information on networks like the PPRN and the bronchiectasis and NTM registry. In general, our strategy is based on priorities that are set by our community, including one of our flagship programs called COPD 360 Net. And Carol, you mentioned that before, the Foundation's Digital Health, Therapeutics, and Medical Devices Development Accelerator. We recently partnered with 2 biotech startups. INA Respiratory is focused on the prevention of flare-up, or as we call them, exacerbations that are caused by respiratory viruses. Another startup that we partnered with is Renovian, who's focused on reducing the burden of mucus that plugs the airways of many patients. And they're about to start a study in people with bronchiectasis. So those trials will be really instrumental in informing these companies how to progress. In response to questions about any new clinical trials, I can't list them all, but I encourage people to look at our websites for COPD or the website for bronchiectasis and NTM for actively recruiting trials. We also include information in our newsletters and in our community, and you can sign up for our newsletters. If we provide the link in the chat, it might be easier to find them, but we really encourage people to look at that. But I wanted to mention something else. One of the reasons innovative treatments cannot be developed fast, we think of acceleration, is that the tools to measure the effects of treatment that stop the progress of lung disease, especially in its early stages, are lacking. And in fact, I'd like to bring Alan Hamilton into this conversation because he's leading a new patient-centric research collaboration. Alan is the leader of PIVOT program at the foundation. Could you spend a few minutes telling the audience about PIVOT and its importance to our community?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Ruth. I'd be happy to. So PIVOT, it stands for a patient-inspired validation of outcome tools. And it's a patient-centric framework that will support the coordination of activities for developing, validating, and ultimately qualifying outcome measures that evaluate the benefit of treatment approaches in COPD, bronchiectasis, and NTM lung disease. So the PIVOT program actually, for us, represents an intentional pivot for the foundation in its support of initiatives that improve the evaluation of treatments in people with chronic lung disease. We are truly passionate in our belief that a patient-centric approach that focuses on treatment benefit will lead to a significant and necessary shift in the way that lung disease treatments are developed and evaluated. So as we drive PIVOT forwards, we continue to have an optimistic vision of the future for patients, the foundation, and also academic and industry research partners.
Thanks, Alan. Could you explain further what you mean by benefit of treatment approaches, and why is this different from anything in the past around drug development tools and regulatory qualification methods?
Yeah, sure, Ruth. Yeah, and actually it's a very important distinction from where we've been as an industry to where we're going. So traditionally, evaluation of treatment approaches in clinical research is focused on efficacy and effectiveness. But PIVOT is going to shift to a related but distinct concept, namely treatment benefit. So central to the PIVOT philosophy is that establishing a well-understood relationship of an outcome measure to a meaningful aspect of how a patient feels or functions in his or her usual life is going to be central to the conclusion that the observed effect is actually a treatment benefit. Now, importantly, we're saying that the evaluation of treatment benefit needs to focus on meaningful outcomes, which are aspects of health that the patient cares about and has a preference that either do not become worse, are improved, or are prevented. So just to give an example, during the patient listening sessions we held with the FDA or the Food and Drug Administration this past October, numerous patients highlighted that limitations in their daily activity because of persistent breathlessness is a meaningful aspect of health that is impacted by their lung disease, creating not only physical limitations, but also an emotional burden and reducing their quality of life. So for us, it's imperative that any research initiative that develops a clinical outcome assessment must incorporate qualitative research methods to fully understand if there is also a meaningful benefit to the patient. Do they feel and or function better? Is their lived experience improved? This will then ensure that the outcome measure is meaningful to the patient and that improvement in the measure can be deemed a true treatment benefit. Now, for other members in the ecosystem, members of the pharmaceutical industry, for example, PIVOT will pave the road to innovation because the effects of new treatments in clinical trials can then be evaluated using measurement tools that are accepted by the clinical, scientific, and patient communities as signifying true treatment benefit. And for healthcare providers, PIVOT can lead to more consistent ways to evaluate the benefits of treatments, which will help them to deliver evidence-based care.
Thanks, Alan. Why is PIVOT being introduced now, and how can someone get involved?
Well, actually, it's quite a history for the foundation in this area. And actually, since 2010, the foundation has played a vital role as a facilitator in the CBQC, which was mentioned by Carol earlier, and stands for the COPD Biomarkers Qualification Consortium. Now, that initiative focused on regulatory qualification of drug development tools in COPD. And with the recent closeout of the CBQC and the current increased attention on patient-focused drug development, the timing really is ideal for the foundation to take a leadership role in driving a patient-centric approach to the validation of outcome measures in COPD, bronchiectasis, NTM lung disease, and also other chronic lung diseases as well.
And so in summary, we're moving beyond FDA qualification of drug development tools, which obviously is very important. And instead, we're pivoting and focusing on clinical scientific validation of measures of treatment benefit that matter to patients and their providers and will help industry and patients. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. And I'd like to emphasize that, as with many of the foundation's programs, we will passionately advocate for the voice of the patient to be fully integrated throughout this process as we work with other patient advocacy organizations and with industry.
Thank you. We're proud of our patient-centric approach to lung health research, and we seek to prevent disease from progressing and hopefully find cures. Research has shown that lung diseases like COPD and bronchiectasis develop well before people have symptoms or get diagnosed. Many people experience symptoms for many years. They're treated with a variety of medications that were developed for people with established or more advanced disease. If we are to prevent progression or heal the lungs early enough, we need to diagnose disease early and help people understand how to take care of their lungs. We know how to take care of our hearts. We know how to take care of a lot of things, but we don't talk much about our lungs. The sooner a person is diagnosed and can manage their health, the better. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes between 5 to 12 years of illness before a person is diagnosed with conditions like COPD or bronchiectasis. And that is what we've seen in a lot of our surveys, and a lot of many community members have been telling us that. We have a patient ambassador with us today, John Torrance. John, you've written a series of blogs about your lung health journey and the long road you experienced to diagnosis of bronchiectasis and NTM lung disease. Are you willing to share a little bit about that with the audience?
Of course, Ruth, and it's my pleasure to be here today. I was an otherwise healthy middle-aged man. I started coughing about the time of my 50th birthday. At first, I thought it was just a cold or a flu, but after a reasonable time, it didn't go away. I thought maybe it was environmental or diet or allergies. So I went to the drugstore. I tried every single cough and cold flu medicine that I could find. I looked up things on the internet. I tried everything I could for 2 years, and it didn't go away. But I realized that there was some kind of pattern. So I went to the doctor finally in my 3rd year of what now I call a persistent cough. I realized I had received multiple diagnoses of pneumonia from the various general practitioners I had attended. They prescribed treatment with short doses of common antibiotics, but I never found any relief. By the end of the 3rd year, I was coughing constantly. I could hardly catch my breath at times. It interrupted my ability to get any work done. I got frustrated, and I just decided I'm going to go to the clinic and I'm going to talk to somebody. So without an appointment, I went in and I insisted on seeing a doctor. She was very patient with me. She did an x-ray and she found something called a nodule on my lung that she thought might be an early lung cancer. And that was enough to get me referred into the pulmonology department. More tests followed, and instead of finding cancer, they found this disease called non-tuberculous mycobacterium, or as we say, NTM. The doctors at this level never mentioned bronchiectasis. They started a routine for NTM. But some of these terms and medicines that they talked about sounded strangely familiar, even though they said it was a very rare disease. I asked my mom about her lung condition, and sure enough, it was NTM and what she called bronchiectasis. So I asked my doctor if I had bronchiectasis, and he eventually said that I did. I'm convinced to this day that he was not familiar with bronchiectasis, and he had to look it up as I was asking him about it.
Thank you, John. Could you summarize the symptoms that you experienced so we hear them together?
Well, the one that I noticed most was that persistent cough. And what I learned in the medical world is it's okay to have a cough for a cold or a flu, but when a cough lasts longer than one season, for instance, the doctors refer to it as persistent, meaning there's something else going on. That was what I noticed. Now, what else was going on that I really had to think about? I had fatigue, I had weakness, weight loss, and night sweats. But again, it's real easy when you don't realize you have a disease to find excuses as to why you're fatigued, why you have weight loss. So it was the doctors that finally recognized those symptoms for me.
How many providers did you see until you got your diagnosis, in summary?
Oh my gosh, I saw at least 3 different primary care physicians through the healthcare plan that I was involved in over that 8-month period during my 3rd year before I was finally referred to a pulmonologist. And the pulmonologist, he oversaw the testing for NTM and gave me the diagnosis. And the testing was found through both a sputum culture and a bronchoscopy. And he referred me over to the infectious disease department. Now, keep in mind, NTM is not an infectious disease, but these doctors are excellent at putting all the cocktails together, the various drugs, and overseeing it. I can tell you the doctor I saw was the smartest person I've ever met up to that point. He knew how to treat every kind of crazy disease. And he said he'd only seen this version of NTM 3 times in his entire career. He wasn't comfortable being the one to give me a plan of action. So he said, I really need a referral to one of the national centers. And he did specifically mention National Jewish Health as an example of one of the best centers in the country. So I started immediately making phone calls to see how I could get admitted to National Jewish.
Thanks. What treatments did you receive?
Well, the local infectious disease doctor started me on doses of several antibiotics, and these were according to standard. Later on, I found out there were standards in the industry for each different species of NTM. So he followed the standard protocol. It included intravenous medicine, it included inhaled medicine and oral, a very long dose, and it kind of takes a toll on you, but after a while you can learn how to live well with it just by adjusting your diet and your supplements. And so we stayed on that routine for a few months while I waited for the referral to come from National Jewish Health. And eventually my healthcare plan, National Jewish, worked it out so that I could go there. And National Jewish has an in-house system, so that you go there for a week or 2 weeks, and they essentially repeat every test ever done, and they come up with a conclusion right then. So I saw an excellent team of physicians and surgeons there at National Jewish.
And then you had surgery.
I did. I ended up having lung surgery. And the interesting thing was, the surgery was really because of the bronchiectasis, the part that my original pulmonologist didn't even tell me about. The bronchiectasis essentially serves as an underlying condition that allows the NTM infection to get worse. They found that my right upper lobe was particularly bad with the bronchiectasis, and they thought by removing it, then they wouldn't have as hard a time controlling the rest of it.
And did that
the
result
NTM?
Sorry.
Well, no, it's okay. That with the drugs did eliminate the NTM infection for the time being. Unfortunately, my lungs are still just a hotbed of activity for infection. So I have had more infection cycles since then. But at least I know now what the cycle is. So it's not quite so scary going to the doctor anymore. I just have to decide I'm going to take the medicine and do the treatment.
Thank you. So it's been quite, it takes a lot of dedication to take care of your medical situation. Do you have time and energy to do anything else? I know that you do a lot to do the airway clearance exercises, and especially while you have an active infection. Do you have any time to do anything else?
Well, to your point, the airway clearance does take quite a bit of time. So I have to dedicate myself to that because that's important to do that on a daily basis. And I tell other patients that on a regular basis, that you need to keep clearing things out of your lungs. But I make a point that I do want to get out and do activities. I'm going to keep doing the things that are important to me. I still do a little bit of work. I volunteer. I take part in family activities. I don't want to be somebody who just sits at home all the time and has a disease as their only asset, if you will.
Thanks, John. You're really inspiring, and you have such an incredible story of perseverance and participation and shared decision-making with your clinicians on how to manage your health. What advice would you give others experiencing symptoms of bronchiectasis or other lung diseases?
Well, what I've learned is you need to be your own best advocate. If you look back to when I finally got the doctor's attention, it was when I went in because I was frustrated. And maybe they saw the passion. Maybe they saw my emotional state that this guy really needs some attention. So you need to be the one that tells your story. Nobody knows your story like you do. You know, in the time that I grew up, we just went in very passively to see a doctor. And now I'm saying it's different now. You have to go in and actively participate with the doctor. So document the diagnosis and treatments that you're prescribed. Record what works and what doesn't. Report your findings to the doctors in a logical way so that the doctor can see the progress you're making. And don't accept having to cough for 3 years. That's not normal, it turns out. Do your research, compare symptoms, and check your family history. My mother had never been told that there was a genetic component to bronchiectasis, so she never knew to warn us about that. And now we know, and I make sure everybody in our family knows that lung disease runs in our family. Note the patterns of your symptoms, whether it relates to the time of the year, weather, work environment, travel, all those kinds of things. It also helps if you can bring someone to your doctor appointments. Study ahead of time for your appointments so that you have questions written down, ready to go for your doctor.
Thanks. John, could you share the story of the Home Sputum Project? Because that's really an example of how COPD Foundation's been working to help patients.
Absolutely, Ruth. It's something I'm very excited about, and I'm happy to be part of the Home Sputum Project. For the longest time, it has taken forever to get a diagnosis of NTM. And there's different qualities of labs around the country. Depending on what lab you go to, you might get different results. So the COPD Foundation, in partnership with National Jewish Health, with INSMED, and with NTM-IR, is conducting the Home Sputum Project, where patients, through their doctors, can now receive a free sputum test for NTM, and the results will be provided by National Jewish Health, one of the best labs in the country. If you'd like to look at it, you can go to homesputum.org, and that's a page of the COPD Foundation's website to learn more about it. But I believe that this is one way where we will together improve the process of sputum collection and testing.
Thanks. So I think you shared something with us when we spoke that you used to feel like a science experiment with this rare condition. Could you talk a little bit about what impact joining the foundation has had on you?
Absolutely, Ruth. In the beginning, I had a disease not only I'd never heard of, no one around me had heard of it other than apparently my mom had it. I couldn't even pronounce the disease. So, and then the treatments. I've never seen, a PICC line before where you did your own infusions for drugs. So I did feel like a science experiment. I had something medical going on every day, and I felt very alone. No one I knew had this kind of treatment to go through. So when I found the foundation, actually the foundation found me, I suddenly felt like I was at home, that I was with people who had shared experiences and people who I could learn from, other experiences that would help me along the way. And then I learned that I could be helping new patients as they come along. And what I really love, Ruth, candidly, about the foundation is the patient-centric portion of it, that you listen so well to the patient's perspective. We have our committees where we get to speak with vendors, with pharmaceutical companies about what works for us and what doesn't work for us. And that has been a real game changer for all of us.
So really what we try to do is to build that dialogue and really kind of bring everybody together with the voice of patients and their caregivers at the center and have a global conversation with people with chronic lung conditions. So thank you for describing your journey. And do you want to share anything else or talk about World Bronchiectasis Day a little bit?
Absolutely. I want to talk World Bronchiectasis Day. This is something that the foundation came up with this year and shared it with lung organizations around the world. I am so happy to be part of that. And I know Delia is instrumental in creating this day where we're going to have awareness for bronchiectasis all around the world. And I was hoping that Delia would give us some more details about that.
Sure. Thank you, John, for sharing your story and for inspiring others to be their own advocates. It's really important, and your story is very inspiring. So World Bronchiectasis Day was actually born out of a conversation that Ruth and I had in early fall of last year. We were talking about an event that we were planning in honor of Rare Disease Day, actually. And Ruth asked, why don't we have a dedicated day to bronchiectasis? After all, it affects hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of individuals worldwide, including children. And so recognizing the need to increase global awareness, Ruth suggested that we take the lead in declaring a World Bronchiectasis Day. So we contacted several patient advocates and representatives from organizations in numerous countries around the world. And they were all very enthusiastic about the initiative and agreed to help us organize World Bronchiectasis Day. And so with that being said, World Bronchiectasis Day is being observed annually on July 1st, with this year being the inaugural event. And our theme is bringing the world together for bronchiectasis.
Thank you, Delia. Can you share a little more about our partners? Because we certainly cannot do this alone.
Absolutely, yeah. So we've partnered with several patient advocates like John, patient advocacy organizations, professional societies, and academic researchers from the US, Australia, Japan, China, India, Europe, and South Africa. Because like many chronic lung conditions, bronchiectasis is not unique to the US. It impacts people in every part of the world. And so we've really come together to make this a global effort.
Thanks. So John shared this incredible story about his journey to diagnosis and what he's faced over the years of symptoms and infection. Could you elaborate a little bit about what bronchiectasis is and what are the signs and symptoms?
Sure. So bronchiectasis is a chronic lung condition, and it's characterized by enlarged airways that are thickened or scarred. And when the airways are affected in this way, they create an ideal environment for bacteria to collect and grow, which can lead to frequent lung infections, as John was experiencing, causing more lung damage and worsening respiratory symptoms. So common symptoms of bronchiectasis include long-term cough, often with sputum, breathlessness, fatigue, fever, chills, weight loss, chest pain, and as previously mentioned, repeated lung infections.
Thank you, Delia. We also had an audience member ask a question about bronchiectasis, which is, what are some of the ways a person can get bronchiectasis? What's the cause?
Sure. So the most common cause of bronchiectasis is severe lung infection, which can include pneumonia or non-tuberculous mycobacterial infection, NTM, as John mentioned, and influenza. But some people also have genetic variants that could lead to bronchiectasis. And these can include cystic fibrosis and primary ciliary dyskinesia, which is also known as PCD. And in these diseases, there are problems with clearing the mucus from the lungs, which can lead to bronchiectasis over time. And unfortunately, in up to half of the cases of bronchiectasis, researchers are unable to determine the cause. And so oftentimes this is referred to as idiopathic bronchiectasis.
Thanks, Delia. Definitely highlights the need for more research. Could you tell us about the educational events that are happening as part of World Bronchiectasis Day?
Sure. So we have a lot planned actually coming up. So the week leading up to July 1st, we will be rolling out our popular Lace Up for Lungs campaign in support of World Bronchiectasis Day. So as part of this campaign, we've developed a toolkit to unify our global messaging and encourage community members to get active and spread the word about staying healthy and informed about bronchiectasis. And the toolkit includes several blurbs and infographics for posting on social media, a goal tracker, as well as a downloadable printable sign that you can write in your reason for lacing up in support of World Bronchiectasis Day. And then on July 1st, we have 2 exciting events planned. A Facebook premiere event, which is titled Living Well with Bronchiectasis. And during this educational event, Mike Hess, who is a respiratory therapist on the foundation team, is interviewing Katie Keating, who is a bronchiectasis patient ambassador and registered nurse, about living well with bronchiectasis. And so Katie gives great advice on topics such as airway clearance, nutrition, exercise, which are all important in managing bronchiectasis. So this event will air on the foundation's Facebook page on July 1st at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And then the second event is the release of an educational video series geared towards healthcare providers, which aims to increase awareness and education among the primary care community. As John mentioned, he had seen his primary care provider and they were unable to, help establish a diagnosis for him. So we've decided to focus some of our education on primary care community. And so in this video series, our very own Dr. Tim Axamit, who's our Bronchiectasis and NTM 360 Medical Director, as well as co-chair of World Bronchiectasis Day, will be covering topics that will help primary care providers identify bronchiectasis in patients so that they can then be diagnosed and referred to a specialist for proper disease management. And in addition to those events, many of our partners are hosting events on World Bronchiectasis Day as well, which we're listing on our website, which is worldbronchiectasisday.org. And lastly, we also have many educational resources and a wonderful new video that I'd like to call out. It's titled Faces of Bronchiectasis, and it highlights the personal stories of individuals around the world who have bronchiectasis. And actually, John participated in that video. So I would encourage anyone who's interested in learning more to check out our website. Again, it's worldbronchiectasisday.org.
That's valuable information, Delia. I've seen that video. It's phenomenal. I would recommend anyone to watch that. It's really inspirational. We'll be sharing that across social as well. We're really looking forward, speaking of social, to people getting on social media and sharing World Bronchiectasis Day, whether you're wearing your t-shirt, you're lacing up, or different ways to just help us share awareness about what bronchiectasis is. Just a reminder, July 1st, we'll be looking for people to help with that. And also, I wanted to be able to thank everyone today for joining us. Thank you, Ruth, Alan, John, Delia, for your insight and information. It was very, very powerful information. And I thank our participants for coming together and listening to our patient-centric priorities. In a moment, we're going to post up a slide with some of the resources and links that we mentioned through the event today. And this event, as a reminder, will be available for viewing on demand in a few days. We'll be emailing all the people who signed up for the event, and we'll have it right afterwards for everyone to be able to see. So please continue to follow us on social media, through our news channels, and we'll keep you posted about future town halls. Thank you for joining us today.